Absolutely. Let's go.
Okay, all right. မင်္ဂလာပါအားလုံးကိုကြိုဆိုပါရစေဒီနေ့Line Up Education View Education နဲ့ကြိုဆိုတယ်ကျွန်တော်တို့ဒီ interview လေးမစခင်ပေါ့နော်ကျွန်တော်ဒီလိုမျိုးonline course တွေ class တွေမဟုတ်လည်းဒီလိုမျိုးပညာနဲ့ပတ်သက်တဲ့သိတာတဲ့တင်းတွေကြည့်ချင်တဲ့ဖတ်ချင်တဲ့မြင်ချင်တဲ့ဆိုရင်ကျွန်တော်ရဲ့ page Line Up Education View Educationကို like လုပ်ပြီးတော့ follow လုပ်ပေးကြပါဒီနေ့ကျွန်တော် interview မဲ့လူကတော့ကျွန်တော်Zach ဖြစ်တယ်သူကတော့ IBM မှာthe project manager လုပ်ခဲ့တယ်သူစီကနေပေါ့နော်ဒီ management နဲ့ပတ်သက်ပြီးတော့အလုပ်ထဲမှာcommunication နဲ့ပတ်သက်ပြီးတော့သူမှာ share စရာ experience တွေအတွေ့အကြုံတွေအများကြီးရှိပါလိမ့်မယ်ဒီတော့သူကိုခွင့်ရေးပေးအောင် Alright Zach again thank you for coming thank you for doing this I'm gonna have you introduce yourself like the camera the floor is yours.
Okay, well, hello everybody. My name is Zach Little. I am 31 years old and I'm a project manager at IBM for the moment. I'll get back to that in a minute, but I've been married for about 3 years to my wife, Sarah, who I met at Loras College in Dubuque, Iowa. And I also met Kai at Loras. And so I'm happy to be here today and just kind of share a little bit more about my experience working as a project manager and just kind of what I've seen in doing that.
Awesome, thank you for the introduction. So my first question is, what does a project manager do? I know a lot of people probably knows about it, but for those who are new to the field, what is it? So in Burmese, project managerဆိုတာပါလေပေါ့နော် IBM project manager အလုပ်အတွေ့အကြုံလေး share ပေးပါဦး
Sure. So a project manager can do a lot of things. A project manager can be in any number of fields. I happen to work in the information technology field. So at IBM, we're in IT, and so we do a lot of IT level work for customers who are essentially at this point in history looking to streamline their business in a way in the cloud. Using automation, different tools that help processes be simplified. And so for that's, this is just a window into my experience, but a project manager at its core, at their core, is someone who helps to lead a project's effort from essentially most of the time from the very beginning phases until the end when you close it out. And so that really means, you don't do this by yourself. You do this with a team, and you work with a team of people who understand the business needs of a company. And when you're looking at the business needs, you say, okay, well, we can undertake a project. And a project is a temporary endeavor to create a unique product, service, or result for a company. So anyone who, and that's just the basic definition of a project. It is someone who, it is an effort that is temporary, right? There's a beginning and an end. And some projects can last for years and feel like there is no beginning and end. Other projects can be a couple of weeks, a couple of months long. The projects I've worked on have been longer. So I'm definitely in that first camp where it feels they go on forever. But it's an important distinction because in business, that's what a project is viewed as. A lot of people work in business as operations, people who work in the operations, the day-to-day operations that may be repetitive or something along that line. So there's that distinction between project and operations. So project manager is you have a lot of day-to-day tasks. The number one and number two responsibilities of a project manager, and I'm sure I'll repeat this throughout here, are communication. You have to be able to communicate strongly and well with your team, verbally, non-verbally, over written communication, a lot of times over email. And you have to be able to, so that communication piece, and then the documentation. You have to be able to document and record meetings and understand and be able to be in a position where you can provide the results of your project pretty much at any given time. You just kind of know what's going on. So the communication is absolutely number one, and documentation, I'd say, is number two.
Thank you, thank you. That was a beautiful introduction and such a detailed and organized, thought out answers to a description or a definition of project manager. Thank you for that. So like just kind of to piggyback on that. So you kind of mentioned that a little bit too. So interpersonal, like people skill and communications are keys, to being successful at your job. Would you agree? So, and if you could kind of, elaborate on that and share some experience.
Sure, absolutely. So number one thing, communication, right? Whether that's verbally having a conversation like this, like Kai and I are doing right now, or back and forth via email or instant messenger. There's a lot of information technology, communication technology available to people now. I work with a team that is all over the world, and this is really cool, and something that I really enjoy with IBM is I work with project managers in Argentina, in Costa Rica, in India. So we've had that experience. I've never met them in person. We have things like Zoom and WebEx and video conference features to meet each other, see each other, but we've never been in the same room together. I mean, a lot of companies, especially with COVID happening, have embraced in a deeper way virtual conference and those types of things. But it's been something I've been doing for 7 years now. And so it's been really a blessing to be able to meet different people from different cultures that I never would have had the chance, but from my living room. I mean, really from my office in the basement. And so the interpersonal skills are key because it's how you communicate, right? It's how you interact with others, whether you're in the same room or not. And that leads to success. I am not someone who is an expert in information technology. I think the key is I was really nervous to join IBM because I thought it needed to be a programmer or a system administrator. And the beautiful part is that I'm not those things, but through communication, we get to success. I've learned a lot, obviously, but at the same time, we drive together as a team to where we need to be successful. And that's why interpersonal communication is so important.
That's important. I think you kind of mentioned the fact that it's not always the technical side of it, but also like the people side, I guess, right? So which you bring into, which is so important because, you work with people, you have to understand them. So which is great. So could you just share one example that problem with communication, like you misunderstood somebody, working with somebody with a different personality, could you share one anecdote or some sort of a little story that you have?
Sure. So I think there's a lot of value to some conversation going on right now around the idea of emotional intelligence. And so emotional intelligence fits into this puzzle because, as I mentioned, working with people from around the world has been exciting, but also challenging. It's not, I don't immediately understand what makes those people tick, right? I need to understand their motivation, their incentive, their why they are, who they are, what led them in their lives to become project managers or whatnot, or different members of a team that I work with that maybe aren't project managers. And so, Kai, to your question, I've worked with people who have been very difficult to get along with. Their personality is not as easy to relate with just from their experiences. And so the way I try to go about that is I try, I'm not always able, but I try to look at it from their perspective. I try to see what they see. And again, I'm not always successful at this. I want to emphasize empathy. That, but right. Empathy and trying to see that. And again, that emotional intelligence, trying to look beyond yourself and understand that there are different viewpoints and experiences in the world that could contribute to meaningful conversations. So, having those conversations and with people that I struggle with, the best way to go about it, in my view, has been to try to talk. And if they're really resistant, I mean, there's business processes involved to get them on board, escalation and things like that, which are never my favorite thing. But again, I think the number one thing is to just try to engage with the person, and be personal, and try to get to know them, right? Try to ask,
Definitely.
who they are. And when you get to that point and that level, it becomes more than just a work transaction, if that makes sense. And I think I'm probably long-winded now, but I'd say that's kind of a good example. Just try to get to know them a little bit more than
Definitely
beyond
build
the
that.
work. Yes.
Yeah, build that relationship, I guess, right?
Yes.
Which is so important, not just in project management, but anything that you do. I think like you say, first talk to them. I think, that's such a simple theory, but again, you actually have to do it.
It is.
Talk to them, try to, build rapport, and then hopefully, because I think, once you understand each other, it's much easier to work together. Thank you. So, kind of, again, following that answer or that response, my next question is, what is the the best way to encourage your coworker, or like your employee that you're managing? How do you make sure that things are getting done in such a sometime a big organization like IBM? So how do you, like, but on a minute level, so how do you encourage, what do you do to get the best out of someone? So in Burmese, ပြီးတော့လူပေါင်းစုံနဲ့ပေါ့နော်လောက်ရတယ်ဆိုတော့ဟုတ်လားလောက်ဖို့ကံဘက်တွေနဲ့မဟုတ်လည်း boss တွေနဲ့ဘယ်လိုအဆင်ပြေအောင်ဟုတ်လားထိထိရောက်လုပ်နိုင်အောင်ပါတယ်လုပ်တင်လဲ
Sure. So I would say, building on what I answered previously, I think the best way to go about working with someone and encouraging another is, in both project management theory, which is there's information and textbooks on this, but also just in almost common sense experience as you go through life, is to be relatable, to be someone who can be approachable. And if you're open to that, that often opens a lot of doors. I think a lot of people say that being an expert is very beneficial because people then view you as an expert and they want to come to you and learn. And that is often true. But I think that being someone who is a strong relationship builder pays off more in that case, because sometimes people who are experts maybe aren't as relatable, and can be someone who maybe pushes people away, whether it's accidental, they don't mean to do that, but sometimes that is the result, right? Well, they're so smart, they're so busy, I don't have time to talk, they don't have time to talk to me. So in that case, it's I've seen that happen at IBM where, well, but then I've seen other people who maybe aren't experts, and myself included with that, right? I'm not an expert, I'm always learning. I think that's another attitude people need to embrace, is the idea of continuous learning. It's very, very important. But I don't want to get sidetracked. But when I see people that I have a problem, or I need to get something resolved, and I go to them and they may not know the answer, a lot of the value of really folks who take a lot of initiative and leadership and pride in their work are people who will say, I don't know that answer, but I know who I can talk to get that answer. And being approachable that way, build that bridge to the next person who has that answer. That's a very valuable trait, I think, just to be able to say, people can just say, hey, I don't know it, go figure it out. And that isn't helpful to you who are asking the question. And at the same time, for the person who you're engaging with. So being relatable and being someone who is willing to help, those characteristics, I think, are very valuable, and
that's
can
awesome.
go a long way. Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you for sharing that, because that's so important. I think sometimes you want to be someone who's approachable, as a leader like you. I think otherwise people, I find people intimidating sometimes. So I think you don't want to be that person, which has some value in certain situation, but I think it's not always a good thing, especially like in a position like you have, like, people need to be, like, you need to have an open door. People should be approaching you, asking a question. And I like the second part that you're saying, where, if you don't know, like, be honest, be true to yourself. And also, but don't just leave it there. Hey, you know what? There's somebody who can help you. I think doing that, like they say, what's the word? The phrase that always the extra mile, like which
Yeah.
is so important.
Yes. Yes.
So would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. People see that in certain folks that I work with, and they love that, right? And
Hmm.
they return to that person for
Hmm.
things
Hmm.
in the future because they know they're going to be helped in some way. And again,
Yeah,
it may not be that person who ends up helping you, but they'll get you to where you need to be. And building that's a relationship
exactly.
building all by itself.
Exactly. Sometimes it doesn't take that long to do that little extra mile. It
No,
might take you a
no,
minute, 30 seconds, right? If you think about it. Yeah.
exactly.
So
Yes.
sometimes we're so busy, you're like, you know what, forget it. Like, but that little thing that you did for someone, like, hey, it carries on, it adds up. And then people remember those little moments, I would say.
Hmm.
Um,
Absolutely.
so, I mean, thank you. Thank you for those, wonderful insights. So again, building on that, let's get a little sidetracked. It's okay to get sidetracked. I mean, what's thinking of IBM, by the way, like, what is IBM doing these days? Like, because if I think about, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, I know what's going on
Hmm.
with them, but with IBM, like, where are they going? What kind of business are they in? Oh, by the way, I'm not too far from, like, I'm like 15 minutes away from Endicott where IBM started, I think. They still have that old building.
Okay.
So, which is, I think I'll send you a picture one day, which is pretty cool. And if you ever come by,
Please do.
upstate New York, I'll take you there. But yeah, so what is IBM doing? I mean, if you could just tell me, like, it's in your
Sure.
department, the IT department, I guess.
Sure. So, I mean, a lot of IBM is the IT department, I'll say.
Okay.
That's a primary focus for where we're at.
Okay.
So we're in the Global Technology Services
Okay.
division of IBM. And so a lot of IBM in general, but definitely the world of which I've seen
Hmm.
is focused on streamlining clients to utilize the cloud,
Okay.
utilize automation,
Okay.
different automation programs for our clients to make sure, with the mission of enhanced client security
Okay.
and audit readiness. I'll say that. Those are the two of the primary objectives we've been
I
all
see.
striving toward as a unit for a long time. There's this
So,
transformation going. Oh, go ahead, Kai.
so if I may interrupt, like, when you say cloud, like, is there, so like Dropbox is a cloud service. So is there
Mhm.
like a product that IBM has right now that I'm not aware of? Like,
Yeah, so a lot of this work that IBM does is for internal clients. It's not a lot of
like
like
business.
Fortune
Okay.
500 type of,
Okay.
yeah, it's the business
Okay.
world.
Okay.
We're a lot of times we're in the background. And
Okay.
Kai, to your point, you're not too sure what IBM's doing these days.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, it's not necessarily making a commercial pitch for folks like you or I
Okay.
to do business, although that there is some element of that. But
Mm-hmm.
for whatever that element may be, I've not been involved with it.
Mm-hmm.
I've been involved with internal back end type work to support the
Mm-hmm.
services that we've
Mm-hmm.
agreed to with our Fortune 500 clients and
Mm-hmm.
others. And so a lot of the times folks might go to the grocery store and they might see like IBM on the back of the computer that
Mm-hmm.
the grocery store is
Mm-hmm.
using. And that is a very old business that
Mm-hmm.
we no longer really engage
Mm-hmm.
with. That's just an old
Mm-hmm.
monitor or computer.
Mm-hmm.
But we do a lot of mainframe work. And so you might see some of that around.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but again, a lot of the pitch that IBM makes is to well-established
Mm-hmm.
businesses to increase their portfolio security.
Mm-hmm.
So you see about different security breaches that occur
Mm-hmm.
in systems because they weren't patched properly
Mm-hmm.
or they weren't maintaining the settings they should.
Mm-hmm.
And those are vulnerabilities that expose them to hackers. And so, again, I can go on and on, but another
Mm-hmm.
piece of what IBM does is ethical hacking. They have people on the payroll who ethically hack their own systems and
Mm-hmm.
show the vulnerabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And we think we're doing a good job, and then IBMers come along and say, "Well, no, you're not, and here's why. We just hacked into your system in about 5 minutes.
Wow.
We need to make sure you're more secure in these three areas, or whatever it is." But
Mm-hmm.
so long-winded answer again, but IBM does a lot, but at the same time, not as much for the the individual consumer,
Mhm.
like the companies you mentioned, those are more visible, I think, to folks like
Mhm.
us. And a lot of
That
times,
makes sense. That makes sense. Thank you for the clarification because, like,
of course.
I mean, I kind of heard that, you know, it's kind of going to the business world. Maybe I'm not sure if that's kind of, you know, disengaging me from what IBM does. But thank
That's
you.
okay.
Thank you. Uh,
That's okay.
but I'm sure they're doing well. But so my next question is, you know, so just to kind of put things very simple, if you have to name, you know, three key interpersonal, like it's kind of a little redundant, but I really want to hammer on this three key interpersonal communication or management skill, like to be successful at a job or in life.
Mhm.
So what would they be? Kind of through three terms in there, but so in Burmese ဒီတော့လူလူချင်းဆက်ဆံတဲ့နေရာမှာပေါ့နော် communication နဲ့ပတ်သက်တာ management နဲ့ပတ်သက်တဲ့အရာမှာအရေးကြီးဆုံး skill သုံးခုဆိုရင်ပါရှိမှန်းဒီနော်
So I would say that number one would be while we're talking here, everyone can hear us talking, and I think there's an important component that's going on in the background that you don't hear, and that's actively listening. And when you do that, that helps to remove a lot of problems that arise because people are not actively listening. I think my wife Sarah's upstairs and she might be hearing me say this and say he doesn't actively listen all the time. But I think I try and it doesn't always work out, but it's important because in business especially, but every relationship you have, a lot of problems arise when you're not listening. Now there are problems in communication, such as noise that might interrupt the communication that is trying to be transmitted, right? And that's more of a technical way to look at that. So you remove the noise and you're in a setting where you can hear clearly. First of all, that's important. But then when you do that, you need to be actively listening. And a lot of people these days are multitasking, myself included. Again, I'm not perfect at this. But I'm multitasking on my computer over here while we're talking and okay, sure. Yeah. And you might be okay at that, but chances are you're going to miss a lot of what's being said. And then, or you're listening to the other person speak, and I know what I want to say next. And so you're thinking, I cannot wait to say this next thing. I'm not listening to them anymore because I'm so excited to say what I need to say. And that can be disruptive too to successful communication. So number one, active listening. And if I'm being too long, Kai, you just buzz me out
fine.
and I'll wrap up. But active listening.
please, no, continue.
Active listening is very important. Number two, I would say interpersonal skills again is I don't know if I have names for them really, but just I would say be approachable, like we said earlier. I think that's important. Being someone who can think about a problem together with others. So at Loras College, we call it, being critical thinkers. But the world says that too, right? It's not a unique term. And I think having that ability to think deeper about a problem and not just look at what's in front of you is very important. So from an interpersonal skill standpoint, being able to think critically helps to solve problems and bring new solutions that maybe wouldn't have been there if you just thought about it for 2 seconds, right? I would say for number three, it may not sound interpersonal sometimes, but being able to write successfully for business, I think that counts as interpersonal skills. But being able to write emails. I am someone who enjoys to write, and I have learned since being in business that there are different types of writing. In college and in school, a lot of times you're encouraged to write a lot of pages on a topic, and that can take a lot of time and be a challenge. But then in business, a lot of times they just want very short, brief, concise emails that are direct and to the point. And so that was an adjustment for me when I entered the business world, because I was writing, all these beautiful sentences, and my boss was like, Zach, you got to cut that out. So, yeah, what do you mean? I got 10 pages going here.
10 pages
Um,
go.
nobody's reading that in the
Yeah.
business world. They don't have the time. They're very busy, and that shows a sign of respect for others when you can get to your point quickly, and be very clear as to what you need from that person, and know who you're writing to, know your audience. And that written component piece of communication and interpersonal skills is so important, because a lot of that communication takes place that way. And that's a
Definitely.
lot of times the only interaction people have with some people, especially at a company like IBM where it's global. I'm not talking physically to every single person I interact with like this, Kai. I mean, a lot of times someone's a CC on an email so that they're made aware of an issue, and that's it. And so that's their exposure to Zach Little in Dubuque, Iowa, is, wow, this guy writes a long email. I'm not reading past that first sentence, or, hey, I know exactly what needs to be done here, and you're done. So, that's why I'd say that's important. So active listening, for summary, because I am so long, active listening, critical thinking, and good business writing, I'll call it.
Definitely. I think it's now that you brought it up, I think it's so important. I think, and it's the same for us teachers, like communicating. Sometimes, I think, in college, like you say, we're so focused on formality, to write beautifully, because we're talking to professors and all these, highly esteemed professors.
Yes.
So I mean, you're right. I think, when you get into the business world, or just regular, any job, I think, people want you to get into the point, because you're so busy and overwhelmed. It's even reading email, it's like a job out there. So you don't want a really long email. You have 20 emails in the morning, so you want to go quick. Definitely want to keep it short. And the other thing that you brought up with active listening, I think it's so important. Sometimes it's so hard for me, because I'm just thinking about what I want to say, because I don't want to say it wrong, and then as I'm thinking about it, I totally ignore, or I'm not listening to what the other person is saying. That's
right.
And it's, what I've learned, is just forget about what you're gonna say. At least try to listen, and then if you're gonna stutter, coming your point across, at least you understood what he's trying to say, or he or she's trying to say. So I think, which is so important, because at least for me, I have this language barrier, and I'm always trying to think, okay, how am I gonna form my sentence? And in that process, I'm forgetting what that person is saying to me. So, which is not a good thing. And also, just when you say active listening, I think you also mean just listening to it, I guess, emotion and feelings, not just just getting the feel of it, not just the superficial words, I would say. Would you agree?
Yeah, that's very important, actually. And I don't think I talked about that, but that goes back to the emotional intelligence. That goes back to understanding the nonverbal communication of somebody. If you're reading an email, you're just seeing the words, like you just mentioned. But if we're having a conversation like this, you hear a different story sometimes. You can read something that looks like a good thing, but if you hear that same sentence spoken by the person, you might pick up on a whole number of different observations. Wow, that person sounds like they're really excited about this, or really sad about this, or something's there. What is that you need to dig deeper on? But nonverbal communication in conversation like this is really, at least I think, 60 or 70% of it. The words are just a very, very small part. And if you're multitasking to a degree where you're not focusing on anything but the words the person is saying over here, you're missing so much. And again, not perfect at that. I want to reemphasize this throughout. I am not someone who is perfect. I understand to be as good as I can at those things is really valuable. And when you never really get to perfect. I think a lot of people know this, right? But you're always striving to be better, and continuously learning to be better. And so those are the key things, the key takeaways there too, right?
Definitely.
Always work to be better. You're not going to get there right away. It's just not going to happen. And don't be frustrated with yourself. Just take it one day at a time, and you'll grow your skills and your patience and your understanding as you go. And that's been really valuable to understand too.
So important. Yeah, so important. And then if you need help, there are so many, what like the insights and experience and knowledge that you're sharing, like, there are people like you who is willing to help others. So I think, don't be afraid to look for help. Like, I think if you intentionally being true and saying, what, hey, I really need help, I really didn't understand what you're saying, I think, that's being open, that's being, approachable, which is one great skill, like you say. Thank you. So my next question, obviously, is, so what would be the not to do's in managing a project or employees? So in Burmese, မလုပ်သင့်တဲ့ရှောင်တဲ့အရာတွေပေါ့နော် management နဲ့ communication မှာ
Sure. So I think really important here is not, it's not a complicated idea. I'm sure everyone hears about this sort of thing a lot, but never encourage somebody to do something that you're not willing to do. And if you're not willing to do the task, I'm betting there's a reason for that. If it's just a regular day-to-day task in your job environment, and you don't want to do it, do you think you're better than somebody? Because that's not okay. Or it could be a deeper level. It's very important to be ethical in project management, in business, in life, right? That's not unique to project management, but if I'm not willing to do something because, well, this might not be quite good behavior, well, then I wouldn't encourage a project manager, a project team member to do that action. So number one, just never be willing to tell somebody to do something you're not willing to do yourself. And that could be, again, on the ethical side of things, or it could be on the, well, I'm too important. Check your mindset there if you ever are falling into that trap, because we all have something to learn and we all have something to give. And it doesn't matter who you are or what title you might have. You jump in as a team, and that leads to success. So, again, that's a big one. And I would honestly say, kind of more of a general response to the question as well. What are the not to do's? Don't try to be somebody who always thinks you're right. And it goes back to being able to learn and have an open mind. But when you encounter some personalities that think they are experts, like I was mentioning earlier, and they have nothing more to learn. And so when they're talking to you, it can be intimidating, and it can be a challenge to interact with them, because you are intimidated. You don't know how to interact. And so when you're encountering that personality, it really shuts down communication. It shuts down productivity. So if I'm a project manager who thinks I'm right all the time, and I'm going to tell you what to do, and there's management theory as well, management versus leaders. But really, I think a project manager should do less managing and more leading. And if you can do that, that leads to better success as well. So if I'm just managing and saying, you go do this and you go do that, and never engaging with the work yourself, that's not a good leader. You can delegate. That's absolutely part of what project managers do. But just delegating and just telling people what to do and forcing them, it doesn't incorporate a lot of good feeling in your environment.
That's a good point. I mean, could you clarify, because I think you kind of strike a really good point there. How do you draw that line? Sometimes how do you come up as not being bossy as opposed to delegating? So like, how do you do that? Like, you got some practical tips.
Well, it can be a challenge, especially if there are folks who aren't as engaged in the process, and you just need to get the work done. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes, a lot of times, what's behind that, I try to look at situations that conflict that can come up, and I try to look at conflict and say, okay, well, what are we really struggling on this component of it, or is there something behind that is blocking successful communication, or whatever it might be? Because sometimes a person might be having a really bad day, and just as a simple example, and they're being very argumentative or short and not really engaging with us. And so think, geez, I'm getting frustrated because they're being short. But behind that is the fact that they're having a bad day. So you don't always have time, but you try as best you can, I think, to go to that thing. Ask about that thing. Hey, are you okay? Is everything all right? Something seems off today. What's going on? And so again, this is kind of a roundabout answer, but that can often lead to better success, is taking that moment, like we said earlier, going the extra mile and understanding why someone is behaving the way they are, and building that relationship. And over time, that pays off in a large way.
Definitely.
But managing and leading, delegating and bossing people around, how do we balance that? Is really, it does go back to, do you have those relationships built? I am in a position where it feels weird, but I'm a lead project manager. So essentially, sometimes people think of that as a team lead kind of position, or maybe a supervisor. I assure everybody I don't have any real power. And you got to keep your head about you with that. But no, I view myself as being in a position to help others understand their job sometimes. So we hold daily meetings, and in those meetings, we discuss the progress of our team, who each works on different accounts in our deployment effort for the project we're running. So we're deploying some automation for our clients. And so project manager A and B and C each have about 5 accounts, let's say. So we all discuss each day, and there are plenty of times where they say, hey, Zach, I don't know, how to do this. And that's where I say, okay, well, let's go look at the documentation we have on this process and review it and make sure we do that in the right way. But then other times I have tasks that have been given to me from above my head that need to get done. And it makes sense for each project manager to do that for their account rather than me just doing the work. It wouldn't be efficient because I haven't built the relationships with those clients like each of the project managers have. So it's really that network that ends up working truly in a productive way, where I'm delegating this important task that needs to get done because you know better the people to talk to than I do. If I try to do it, it's going to take me twice as long, right? So that's important. And I think being able to build the relationships with your team pays off because they trust you. You build this trust over time. It is not something that comes immediately. And I love, love. I don't remember where I heard this phrase, but this really wonderful advice. It said, trust comes by foot, but leaves by flight.
Wow.
And so what that means is it takes time to earn trust of people. You're not going to do it overnight, but you can lose it overnight if you do something that is unethical, or you lose your way, or get angry and blow up. I mean, people suddenly might get shy and not want to work with you. So building that trust is key. And when you have that, people are often more likely to see you as a leader rather than just someone who bosses around, right? I mean, if you do that, okay, but you're not going to be as successful as you can be. So, yeah.
So important. I love that quote, by the way. It's so important. I think, it's kind of had that little aha moment there, because you're right. Because I think anything can come off as bossy, like, no matter how hard you try, if there's no relationship or no trust.
Yeah.
But once you have that trust, like, you could do anything because the other guy gets you,
Exactly.
everything is, just smoother. I mean, that's so important because that's why I don't think there's, people always say, what should I say? That's not important. It's okay. Do you have the relationships? So whatever you say, so like, with siblings, I can say all the mean stuff, but they don't get angry like with best friends because like we know each other, like, right. Thank you for the little aha moment. That was beautiful. So my next question, just 2 more questions actually. So I know, thank you for your time, by the way, Zach. Really appreciate
absolutely.
it.
Absolutely.
So, so like, for, I guess, upcoming students, whether, for us, I think for my audience, it'll be international students or like, like students anywhere, looking to work at IBM or looking to pursue a management career. What is your advice to them? So in Burmese, IBM, absolutely, công ty để mà management အသင်းနဲ့ဝင်ကျင်တယ်မို့နဲ့အကြောင်းတက်ပြီးတော့ management သင်ကျင်တယ်ဆိုရင်သူတို့အတွက်ပါ advice ပေးချင်တယ်
So I think for those looking to work for IBM specifically, or just generally in project management, I would say the number one thing for folks to embrace is be comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's the only thing you can be comfortable with. So you really, yeah, just you need to be willing to challenge yourself and learn new things and go places you didn't think you'd go to learn. And I mean that because in the 7 years I've been with IBM, it has been frustrating at times, a lot of times. It has been a challenge. And I truly believe I've benefited from that more than I would have thought, you know, in the moment of struggle, right? But if you're able to do that, I'll give kind of another metaphor. It's like with anyone who cooks. If you don't have good tools, if your knives aren't sharp, you're not going to be as successful in the kitchen. And so if you keep your skills sharp, and you kind of go down that path of learning and embrace that, I think that leads to long-term success. And so, you know, that's really the number one thing, is just be comfortable being uncomfortable, and continuously learn. Be a continuous learner.
That's the only way you learn. I think you just jump into it, like sink or swim almost, right? So I mean, thank you for those beautiful advice, I think, which is so important, that I would say one skill or one habit, maybe you kind of touch on it, but that has been consistently being useful to you, right? From, you know, high school, college to your to IBM. So in Burmese, Zareka trip on amazing to get a tone like a skill more than a chin the coup so in Batimle.
Yeah, so you know, I talked about this earlier. You know, all the interpersonal communication we're talking about is so important. I am not somebody who is an expert in IT. Just because I work at IBM, sometimes people think, oh, you're so smart in computers and things. It's like, well, I know how to use a computer, but I don't know how to program a computer. I don't know how to, you know, be a system administrator and do that technical work. It's just not how my brain works. But the number one thing, and again, I did mention it earlier, for me, it's just been a God-given talent that I'm able to write. I kind of discovered this talent in high school, and I just have built upon it since. And again, there's different writing, but being able to do that and know your audience and know how to write for who's going to read what you're writing has been really beneficial. And just being able to you know, that pays off in a number of ways, especially at IBM, but in a number of companies with all the instant messaging. So maybe it's not even email anymore, right? Email is even slower than instant message. And so many people now are on instant message every day at work. That's how they sign on. And exactly. And so being able to write what you need to communicate is so important. And so it's just paid off in a number of ways. And it's just a talent that I was gifted with. And I would say that for me, that's been the number one thing that I've used, you know, all my life, but it's essentially, especially in the business world, it's been really beneficial.
Definitely, that's so important. I mean, are you, like, just kind of a side comment or question, like, are you frustrated with the I would say, like, and obviously with instant messaging, everything is just like phrases, like, you know, you don't really care about the grammar, but, you know, it gets to the point. Are you frustrated with that? Like, you know, people with bad grammar or spelling?
I'm going to get in trouble here. Yeah. I understand that there's a lingo, right? That goes in the short messages of the day, of course. But when that translates to business writing, that's when I get frustrated. I think I've seen really inappropriate, you know, abbreviations and things in business that are like, well, I'm not I'm not texting you on my personal time. That's
Yeah.
not really something you should say
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
And there's context, right? And that's so
Yeah.
important, is
Mhm.
understanding the context in which you're writing, the audience. And
Mhm.
when you do that, that's okay. I mean, when I'm
Mhm.
texting my wife or my friends, we're
Ah.
goofing around.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think when you're talking to people at work, there's a certain expectation
Ah.
of
Formality. Like,
rules,
yeah. Yeah.
formality,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Beautiful. I think, that's an important context. I think, you hit the right word there. Obviously, like, it's the way I talk to my friends. It's different from the way I talk to my coworkers. Like, it could be pretty informal. Like, I might not have the best grammar, but at least, I don't, I don't make it too casual. Like, with my coworkers, I want to make sure that there's a little bit of formality, but also, like you say, concise at the same time. Thank you. Thank you so much. So, like,
oh my
I
gosh.
know you have, like, probably, like, I always tell the people that I interview a mantra, or, like, something that you live by. I don't know, a motivational story. Final thoughts, I guess. Final words. Yeah.
Do you want to say that in Burmese, or do you need to?
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
know.
So, yeah. Thank you for the reminder. I did that with one of the interviews. I forgot. But yeah, နောက်ဆုံးပြောချင်တာပေါ့နော် Zach အတွက်ကျွန်တော်နောက်ဆုံးစကားလေးစကားလေးပါပြောချင်တယ်မသိဘူး
Well, Kai, it has been an absolute pleasure spending an hour with you. We haven't talked in a long time, so it's very good to see you and to talk with you.
Oh, same.
Oh, absolutely. So for me, there are so many things. I'm a religious person. I'm a Catholic, and there's a number of challenges with that, that I struggle with. But I'm Catholic, and I've always viewed that as very important. But so I feel like I'm going to leave something out here. But a couple of good pieces of advice that have guided me through a lot of my life. One is kind of from the Catholic tradition, but two is more, I guess I'd say, secular in nature, but that applies in all of life. So number one, I would say, as a Catholic, but as a Christian and as a person, I feel the call to engage with people as though they are Jesus. And so what I mean by that is, I try to approach different conversations and different interviews, and it's not always the same with business, of course, but with love and with patience and in my heart. And I try to do that. Again, it doesn't always work that way, but I don't have like a fancy phrase, but it goes with the Catholic social teaching of the dignity of every human being, the human dignity. Every human has dignity, and I try to interact with others, recognizing that dignity. And so that part for me has been so rewarding, as I mentioned earlier, to be able to interact with folks from around the world in my day-to-day job. That has been so rewarding, to be able to see different elements, because when you're in your own world, so to speak, in your own bubble, you don't necessarily see a lot of diversity sometimes, but being able to see the diversity and recognizing that truth, that human dignity is in every single person from around the world, is a really powerful and rewarding and exciting thing to see in a meaningful way. I'll say that. So recognizing the human dignity and approaching people with love and patience and peace in my heart. Number two, more general, more from like a business kind of mindset of how am I successful. Two kind of quotes, I'll say, not really quotes, but ideas. If you decide to commit, you will succeed. So 3 actions there: decide, commit, succeed. When you make that decision, I am going to do this for this reason, and you commit to it, you will find success. And I have found that to be true and a guiding light. Additionally, and building on that, is consistency over time equals results. So some people use these types of phrases in fitness and trying to be physically fit, but that applies to life and business and other areas too. Whatever you decide on, commit to it and you'll succeed. And when you are working toward those goals, it's important to be patient, be persistent, be consistent,
Mhm.
And over time, that will lead to success. So
Wow.
I would say that.
Well,
I hope
thank you.
that's okay.
Yes, yes, very inspiring and beautiful words.
Oh,
Yes, consistency is so important. Like, we always think about trying to do big things and, but hey, it's
mhm.
what counts is the little things that you do consistently every day. And I like, how you kind of shared your little identity, like, from a Catholic background. So it's always
Mhm.
good to have that, your kind of a uniqueness. I mean, holding on to that pole, I guess, right? So
Right.
which is a good thing to have. I think, otherwise you kind of lose, you become so big and bigger. It's like, and I think it's like a good foundation or principle that you hold on to, like, treating everyone with respect and, respecting the dignity. Thank you.
Mhm.
It's a good reminder for me as well. Thank you for sharing that. That was beautiful. Thank you for your time.